Welcome back to the Starbase Indy Podcast, where we talk to people who are inspired by science fiction to work towards a hopeful future in the real world. Okay, so let's jump right in. Let's start by having you introduce yourself.
Right. I am Justin C. Key. I am a writer and a psychiatrist. I say it in that order because I've been a writer longer than I've been a medical doctor. I was writing throughout medical school, and I've had short stories published in a lot of different print and online journals. And then my first novel, The Hospital at the End of the World, will be out in February 3rd. And before this, I also had a collection of short stories, The World Wasn't Ready for You. I am a practicing psychiatrist. I do outpatient psychiatry. I'm also a husband and a father of 3. So that's me.
Excellent. So you started off writing horror, but you shifted more towards science fiction in medical school. Was it a medical school that created that shift or something else?
Yeah, I'd say that it definitely pushed the shift. I'd say that writing horror was my first love. And I think how I write in terms of being what you call like a pantser, writing by the seat of my pants
Mm-hmm.
in terms of I don't outline. I actually think now that I think of it, I think that horror was really ripe for that. In terms of like just sitting down and seeing where the characters go, etc. And then going into science fiction, it does take a bit or a lot more like research and kind of thinking about how the science comes together. I had been a reader and a fan of science fiction growing up. And as I was going through medical school and just naturally being exposed to, the latest technology, being exposed to, research in the hospital, just the implications of how technology can change or would change medicine, just like ideas that came, just more and more. It was ideas of, what if medicine looked like this or what if that, etc. And then also kind of I think learning a lot how to research and question in medical school gave me I think more confidence to kind of reach out and branch out outside of medicine too when it comes to science fiction. Still write horror regularly, so I haven't completely abandoned it at all, but it was coming into my own as a writer. A lot of it was becoming like a father and going to medical school because I've been writing since I was, right before I became an adult. So it's just all of those experiences have been integrated into my writing.
So, at the End of the World is about the ways that AI conflicts with human doctors and human-led medicine. And when I looked at the news this morning, knowing that this interview was coming, I noticed that there is a famous guy out there with a somewhat imperfect record of predicting how quickly technology will take off, saying that we won't need human doctors in 3 years. Do you think he's right? And why not? I'm gonna guess it's probably not.
Yeah, I think that that's probably more of a like a reductionist view in terms of what human doctors in human-led medicine can bring to the table, right? If you take something that's very narrow, for example, like with AI playing chess, right? If you take something very narrow in terms of like who could a doctor versus an algorithm look at an MRI and be able to diagnose it better, or a doctor or an algorithm be able to, if you give them like a vignette of or a case study, something written, and who could come to the diagnosis and the best treatment faster, then AI probably will be able to do better than humans. But then you're forgetting about the value of that human connection. You're forgetting about bedside manners. You're forgetting about like human intuition, like those things that aren't taught in the medical books, that aren't in the studies, that come from seeing patients over and over again, and being able to recognize like fairly quickly, and this could be a positive or negative depending on who is doing it, fairly quickly, like if someone's sick or not sick, if this is normal or abnormal. So I think that on the flip side, I think that our medical system, our healthcare system, unfortunately, has a lot of gaps that AI is going to fill for people, right? Like if someone is, you know, has a high deductible or not able to get insurance or not able to see their doctor or get in on an appointment or what have you, if they can go online and chat GPT and say like, these are my symptoms or what have you, and then they get an answer. And I think that the AI is very good at sounding good and making you feel good about the answer it has. I think unfortunately that's going to fill in a gap, and I think that's probably going to look like it's a replacement in the beginning, but then what are the long-term implications of not having that kind of human at the helm? So, yeah, so I don't see it replacing humans. I see it being fairly disruptive and potentially harmful too, because the healthcare system that we have, just in terms of access to care, I think I could see a lot of people turning to that. And then another aspect from an insurance perspective, right? Like, I'm a psychiatrist and I do a lot of therapy. I dread the day when insurance is like, yeah, you need to see a chatbot therapist first, you know? And we already, not with AI, but I already deal with that as a doctor where insurance will be, well, I'll prescribe a medication and insurance will say, I see you prescribed that medication, but we want you to use this one that's on formulary first. So I think it could be a very easy thing for them to say, yeah, I understand you want to go see Dr. Key for therapy and he is in network and we may cover it one day, but try this chatbot for 3 months first, because it's a lot cheaper. And then we had to see if you really need to see a human doctor. So I could see it being very disruptive.
Absolutely. And one of the things that you said was it is friendly and sounds like it knows what it's talking
Yeah.
about. And that's one of the known issues, right? That it is confident, never in doubt, but often in error. And that impacts the relationship.
Yeah, yeah, and then, I think that, I think early on, like, I think I asked it about me, and it said that I wrote Get Out, which, flattering, but, definitely not true. And it says it with gusto. It's like, "This is who Justin C. Key is, and he's known for this, et cetera, et cetera." And that movie was about this, and that, and themes that he explores in his book, so it's good at sounding right. And if you don't know, if you go in without knowing any of the information or answers at all, you're gonna believe it. I'd say, unless you're skeptical.
One of the professors in the book tells the main character, is it Hawk? Am I saying that
If
right? Okay. Eugenics can look good to an algorithm. AI fixes the problem on paper. And I know enough about AI to know that that is a real thing that has happened. Do you have some examples in mind of that?
Yeah, I think thinking about if I'm saying it right, the sycophancy issue. That's a mouthful. Just it is good at convincing you that it's right. It's good at telling you kind of what you want to hear, and that's not necessarily just giving just positive answers, right? Like if I were to ask it hypothetically, like how is the book going to do? How's it going to work? It's not going to say, oh, it's going to be a bestseller, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But it will say things in a way that sounds true and reassuring. It'll say things that similar to if you ever met those people that sound like they really know what they're talking about because they have like such confidence. But if someone else that does actually know about that subject, they might be like that's BS. They sound really confident, but it's completely wrong. So I think that that's a big issue that's going to play out now in terms of how it may be. I think that combined with the biases that AI and these algorithms are what's it called trained on can
Hmm.
be just a bad combination, right? Like so for example, and I'm sure that there's this since this is known, has been studied, I'm sure there's been, waves to fix this, but there's been studies about like, physicians and their perception of how Black patients perceive pain. And if you can imagine if AI is trained on this, like, and let's say that bias wasn't found out, it was baked in, AI will then create a reason for this, right? So it won't just have that bias because now it's like if you were to ask a doctor, hey, do you think Black patients experience pain differently? They'll say no, right? It's subconsciously, but I could see AI making a reason for it. It's like, yes, they do have a different threshold for pain for this reason, or because they have these origins or this part in their DNA or what have you. It fills in the gap in, I think, dangerous ways. And who knows how that will evolve. But I also think that it's just moving so fast right now, and there's no impetus for the powers to be to slow down because of the competition or what have you. So it feels full speed ahead, and it's hard to know what's going to be reined in and what's going to kind of just be more out of control.
So, in the book, Hawk, I think, describes early on the place that he hopes AI has in medicine, being able to suggest things within the human making the decision. What place do you hope AI will have in medicine? If you had a magic wand.
Yeah. So definitely a tool. And thinking a tool is not anything, it's defined by who's wielding the tool, right? And I think about the things that stand between me and patient care, or I think about the gaps that I might have in knowledge or insight, or I think about when I see a new patient, who's, let's say, has like a psychiatric history, but because of how the system's set up, I don't have that in front of me. So, we're kind of almost starting from square one. There's a lot that they probably remember and they can tell, et cetera, but it'll be different than having like, oh, this is all of the history, this is all of the implications or what have you. So my thoughts, like my magic AI system, if I'm seeing a patient, would be something that is able to tell me like all of the patient's history that's been like recorded there as I come to like diagnosis or insights or thinking about medications or thinking about symptoms, you know, resources that I can click into in terms of like, this is what it has looked like across all of the information that we've aggregated. These are some symptoms that you may have missed, right? Let's say, or these are some things in their daily life that point towards predicting that this could be an issue. I'm thinking about, for example, something like schizophrenia, and it manifests in a lot of different ways. But one thing that we know is that there usually is this what we call prodrome state and symptoms that start years before somebody might have like what is a first break. And I imagine if there's like a tracking system or if there's something that, takes all of this data about people and is able to see it over time, they might be able to pick up like just changes in social cues and interests or what have you and give insight into that. Now, I think that the danger would be like if it's taking that and then it's being prescriptive, right? Because then it's forcing people to have this almost predestination if how I'm acting as a 10-year-old, an algorithm is deciding like where it is, what type of care I should get or where I should go to school, etc. But I think as a tool, being able to have like informed conversations in this example, like with family or what have you, I think could be very powerful. And then just a lot of the paperwork or the things that I think bog physicians down, or the billing and the note taking and all those things. Really, if AI could be like a super assistant in that sense, so that doctors are less, what's it called, burnt out, and then actually have more time to sit and talk with patients. But I think that to answer your question, I think in terms of being preventative, I think it could be very powerful for that, because I do think that medicine and going through medical school, we are taught to be firefighters. We put out fires, right?
Mhm.
And I think that there's definitely a lot of room for, okay, how do we help people not get to the place of fire in the first place? And I think that that algorithms or AI and, having all of this data at disposal could give important insights, helpful insights. But somebody still has to question, like, okay, is this guy talking, or is this like information that I use to decide what's best as a group in this particular person's life and situation?
Yeah, it will be better when people don't think AI is God.
Yeah, no, but I mean, it's out there.
So you have referred to your work as following the Afrofuturism tradition of Octavia Butler. What other authors have inspired you?
Yeah, so growing up, in terms of from the two sides that I came to, horror and science fiction, it's definitely Stephen King. I read a lot of Stephen King, Clive Barker, Peter Straub, really kind of R.L. Stein, K.A. I think it's K.A. Applegate, like the Animorph series very early on, I think really just sparked my creative brain. And I think that's when I started to even think like, well, it'd be great to create something like this, right? It'll be great to like have an idea. Like the premise of that is like, okay, what if you could turn into any animal or morph into that you touch? And then where does that go? It can go all these different directions. Then Michael Crichton was also a big influence on me. I remember reading Jurassic Park. I saw the movie, and it was like my favorite movie. And then my mom worked at the Library of Congress, and she was able to get any book, which is why I was, a big reason I was a voracious reader. and I asked her to give me Jurassic Park. And I remember after reading the book, I wanted my mom to send a letter to Steven Spielberg and say, like, you messed up. Like, this book is just so full of, not knowing how that, happens. But I remember just learning so much while being entertained. And I think that that really ingrained in me. That's what I wanted to achieve as an author. And just you know, going through my journey and back in my mind, I have, Michael Crichton. He went to med school. He did residency, I think, for a little bit, but he was writing from before med school and throughout med school. So I think as I went to pursue that path, I had it in my mind that like you can still be a writer even though you're doing this. He did it, you could do it, for better or for worse.
Having read your book, I think it's absolutely for better.
Well, thank you.
Your prose is just beautiful. This isn't really a question, but some of the sentences that struck me. At one point, you describe Hawk eating an apple as saying he stripped the apple until its baby seeds peered from the inside of the core like spider eyes. And that's just such a brilliant image. And the other one was her words grew fingers that curled around his throat. Now that comes out of your horror background. Really, both of them, huh?
Yeah. Yeah. And
But yeah,
I'm so happy that like that stood out to you because it actually, there's some things that come that, whether it's writing or whether it's like being a doctor or what have you, that it's like it just come like maybe naturally or what have you. And there are some things that you're like, I really want to be good at this. And I think that those things can be rooted in the things that you admire. And growing up and reading books, like going and stopping on a line and being like, oh, that's just, I think as a kid, I thought that writers were like the smartest people on the planet, just from what they were able to put on the page and the metaphors and what they're able to evoke with language. So it's always been something that I wanted to strive towards as well, like, making something that's entertaining, it's fun, it's educational, but I also, want to make the prose sing, and so I'm glad that that stuck out to you.
yeah, you absolutely do make the prose sing. It's gorgeously written. Now, when you started writing, you were doing more short stories and then you evolved into novels during med school. What was that process like?
Yeah, so it's a little bit of a sandwich because I started out writing novels. And for better for worse, for better, I read Stephen King's On Writing early on. Like back in 2007, I was halfway through college, and he said, first million words of practice. He said write every day. He said that he usually spends like 3 months on a first draft, and then he puts it aside. He starts something new, and then he comes back. So I really gobbled all that up. So, in those few years between 2007 and medical school, I wrote like maybe like 4 novels. One of them may be up here, trunk novels that may never see the light of day. But it was great because I think early on was able to tell myself like I can write a novel. I can do this longer work. So then when I took a step back from novel writing and decided to focus more on short stories for a few reasons, because then I could workshop them more readily, like in writing groups, because community, I feel like, has been a big part of my journey, and be able to learn from each short story that either I read or I wrote and had critique from. And then it was also something that I could more easily manage when I was going into medical school. It's a big difference from like revising like a 5,000 or even 10,000 word short story than to sit down, and I think my first novel was like maybe 200,000 words. Like what are you gonna, with the 1 hour or 2 hours that you have, what are you gonna do with that with that time? So short stories, and I enjoy just reading and writing short stories. So it was really almost my MFA for writing, and then also being able to publish short stories and being able to, think of myself as a published writer in that sense and go to cons and connect with more community, and then transitioning back to novels. The main thing I'd say is the editing process is a lot different. Because to be honest, like the difference for me between writing like a 10,000 word short story and a 100,000 word novel, at least the first draft, is time. One takes 10
Mm.
times as long. It is then because I'm a pantser, it is then though the revision process. It is then though, instead of a short story that might have one main idea, you have a novel that maybe has like one big theme, and then all these sub themes, this cast of characters, this whole arc. Being able, I think, to fit that all in your head takes more, I'd say, chunks of time. And I had to figure out how to make that happen. And it's definitely, it would be times in medical school. I was still working on this novel where I had to put it away for like months or even longer at a time just because I wasn't going to be productive with the little time that I had. So I'd say that's been the main difference, is that editing process and kind of taking like that block of ice I've created, or kind of almost spat out, and then carving it into something that's art.
I heard Ada Palmer on a podcast talk about pantsers and plotters doing the same work. It's just that the plotters do it before the first draft
Yeah,
and
yeah, yeah.
pantsers do it after. And yeah, you just mentioned community. And I saw a video on one of your social media posts where you talked about community. So tell me a little more about the role that community and conventions have played in your journey.
Yeah, so early on, I think also with on writing, somewhere in there, knowing that writing can be a very lonely or singular activity, but you gotta break out of that, right? Or else you're just going to be created in a bubble without feedback. So early on, I sought out writing groups, critique groups, learning from other people's write, having that accountability, I think has been great as well. And then just also being able to lift each other up. It applied to Clarion West in like 2012. If it's the first time it was on my radar, I went to Clarion West, which is this writer's workshop for science fiction and fantasy, mainly speculative fiction, in 2015. And that was really like just a pushing into the science fiction community. It's 18 writers. You spend 6 weeks together, and everybody writes a story a week and reads and critiques everybody else's stories. So it's really just immersive, yeah, immersive in craft and community and story, and there's still a lot of people from that I still keep in touch with, have a critique group with like a quarter of them still. And then going after that, and then having that I felt like at conventions, like, oh, okay, I know that I'm going to know somebody here. So always, I know as I continue, whatever it is that I write, whatever it is I want to put out, I want to get other eyes on it, just so that I can continue to learn, I can continue to grow, knowing that there are gaps in my worldview. And I think that's also very important, to be able to be receptive to feedback. I remember one time at Clarion West, I had written a story. Actually, that story just came out in the magazine Fantasy and Science Fiction, but an early draft of it, the main character is a man, and there was a scene, like a love scene that I wrote, and one of my classmates said it read like a sexual assault scene, and that hadn't occurred to me. And it's definitely not something that I was going for. And instead of being like, "Oh no, you don't understand it. How could you say that?" etc., being like defensive, and you know, I learned from that. I've always remembered that, and I think it's changed how I write those scenes. Changed in a way that I take more care, and I'm mindful of not falling in that same trap, really, that, probably is just born out of misogyny or things that I've like grown up thinking of, like what machoism is, right? So I think being able to have that community of other writers has really enhanced my ability as a writer and also as a person.
Does community also play a role in your practice as a physician?
Yes, yes, very much so.
How is that the same? How is it different?
Yeah, so I practice in an outpatient setting and with two other psychiatrists that did the same residency as I did. We started a insurance-based private practice almost 5 years ago now, and now we have 13 psychiatrists. And I jokingly tell people, as like we're, talking to people and bringing on new people, that it's almost like a cheat code for me, because I'm surrounding myself by like all these brilliant, experienced people that I can lean on, that if a patient mentioned a medication or something that is new that I may not have as much experience with, like I'll be honest with that. I'll tell them, I was like, I haven't heard of that, I haven't used it, but I'm going to talk to my colleagues and then educate myself on that based on their experience as well, or see what resources they might have. And then I'll come back. We have a case conference where basically we talk about like either difficult cases or cases we just want like to process on, or maybe for support or to pick other people's brains. We have that every Wednesday. As one of the leaders of the group, I go like every week. It's not mandatory, but I'm
Mhm.
there. And it's very rewarding. And I did have like a difficult. I lost a patient this year, like suddenly,
Mm.
and being able to have that community, I think, was very important. Being able to not just like be in a bubble of, because that can spiral, I think, quickly in terms of like, did I miss something? Did I not do everything right? Or, et cetera, the what ifs, and being able to have that community and people who've known that I've, my experience or talking about this patient for a long time and being like, you gave really great care. I think that that's a phenomenal thing to be able to have in a profession that can sometimes be so heavy, and then being able to be that for other people as well. So yeah, so community definitely plays a big part in my practice and becoming a doctor, which I try to instill in the book. There's a lot of mentorship. There's a lot of times people go into specialties based on the mentors that they have, and then there's friendships as you go through the grueling process of becoming a doctor as well.
It seems to me that one of the core sort of principles of Afrofuturism is a lot more community-based in its approach and mentorship. And so, does do you think those things connect? Is that how they connect in your mind as well?
Yeah, I think that thinking of one of the core, what I think of pieces of Afrofuturism is like, knowing the past to inform the future. I think that that's played a big role in my writing and also how I approach the medicine, recognizing like what medicine in this country is built upon, like being aware of that, then
Mhm.
helps me to kind of define like what type of present I want to have like as a physician, like the knowledge of kind of like where we've fallen short and what atrocities have happened help inform like, okay, what are the different types of things or different types of fears or different types of resistances that I might encounter with patients where if you don't have that knowledge, you might think that someone's just being like difficult or ungrateful or what have you. And I think that, history, I think, has told us that through different tough times or different adversities, like people can't do things alone. So when I envision the future or when I envision the present, and I think this is rich for writing, it really has to be strong connections in there because there isn't really, I mean, there's some stories, but no story that I want to tell that's, putting somebody through the ringer where they're, have to do it completely alone. A community is there. It's how I became a doctor. It's how I, continue to be a good father. And it's how I've been able to make it this far in writing. Like I definitely, a lot of it really has been, to be honest, being a good person and being able to surround myself with people who, make me better.
So, how does your Afrofuturist grounding affect the way you view medicine and the practice of medicine and psychiatry?
Yeah, so it having that awareness of, I think, the past helps with, for example, like if someone is wary of psychiatry, being able to think about, okay, well, there are important reasons for this. There are valid reasons for this, and how can I help meet somebody where they're at, right? And then trying to kind of create a better future together, if that makes sense. I think that a lot of what I do as a psychiatrist and how I've conceptualized it before is that I'm helping people define their story or affect their story or create their story or just unveil what their story is. It almost is like the same kind of pantser mentality. It's like the story is there, but how do we kind of uncover it? How do we kind of have a greater insight into it and having like a cultural awareness of, what has led up to a lot of what we see like in society now, no matter like what your background is. I think it really helps then to kind of define like what the present is and then think about like what you want the future to be. So I definitely think that that's in the back of my mind, like running its gears somewhere when I'm, wearing my doctor hat.
So, do you think your Afrofuturism grounding affects how you see AI?
I think that there is a big apprehension from my part because of who is in charge of AI and what there is to gain from the, you know, the um, the lucrative nature of AI, and then, who it is designed to benefit. So that's definitely there's a big hesitancy there, like from my standpoint. And it's unfortunate because I wish that there was more hope. I think even when I started the process of this book, you know, the first had the idea for it back in 2013, mostly in my mind, it was hopeful in terms of like, this is where technology could potentially take us. Because, if you look at the past 100 years of medicine, at that point, technology had really pushed us forward. So naturally, my thought was going to be, okay, this is the next technology that's on the horizon. This I may be coming into being a doctor in like a golden, exciting age. But now it's, how it's kind of playing out is it's like, oh, this isn't what I envisioned. I didn't think that we'd be using AI for this. So, it's quite a thing to see play out in real time.
That is for sure. So, what are some of your favorite science fiction shows, books, writers?
Yeah, so most recently, really enjoyed Pluribus, and not to give too much away, this is like the first 30 minutes, but I went in blind, but the concept of a virus that spreads in this way, it immediately clicked with it because I know that a virus's MO is to propagate. If a virus kills you within like 5 minutes, it's not gonna survive that long because it's not gonna be able to spread. That combination of like causing disease, but also being able to spread to different people. Thinking of a virus that's infecting an intelligent community, it makes sense that the end goal would be to spread it across the galaxy. So I thought that that was really well done, and I was like, it was kind of like, oh, I wish I'd had that idea. So really enjoyed that recently. On the flip side, like, having like some horror in it, like the Last of Us, and just being able to kind of get the notice, I think, as someone who's in medicine, like some of the nuances of kind of like how this might really happen. And taking like something that we see in the real world where there are this fungi that affect the nervous system and insects and makes them their drones or what have you. And what happens if this happens to humans, I think, is really fascinating. I might not think of this as it might not be too I don't know if people would think of it as science fiction, but it's a science show that's fiction. But I think The Pit is really well done. And I also it's interesting because I watched The Pit and I'm like, is this as enjoyable for people who haven't been through medical school? Because it feels like they're talking another language that I understand. It's actually like while I'm watching I'm like, the audience isn't meant to understand this, but I understand exactly what you're saying. And I'm a psychiatrist and I haven't been exposed to this for years, so I can't imagine. But it's fascinating that that has resonated so much because it really doesn't, we learn as writers or what have you, you don't want to kind of alienate the reader too much. But this show is able to have an almost foreign language and still be engaging and still be that. And I think that probably people learn a lot from it. Like, I probably don't appreciate how much learning is happening because it's a lot of the things that I, take for granted that I already know. But I think that it's probably like what's fascinating about it is being introduced to this world, like this world of medicine. Let's see. So Black Mirror, really was a Black Mirror fan. I feel like I'm haven't caught up on the latest like season, but that was really what I loved about short stories too, is like taking a concept and in a shorter period of time, just like going with it. And I think they had great episodes on like social media and the what's it called, the implications of social media. And as I was writing the book, I was like, I got to make sure I don't step too much on the toes here because a lot of it rang true in terms of what the future may hold. Those are some of the ones. Oh, and then Westworld. You really enjoy Westworld, and then that also has a place in my reader heart because Michael Crichton originally came up with the concept for that show.
Yeah, and the pit, I have not been to medical school, but the medical language almost becomes world building. Like
Yeah.
in science fiction, often there are words that people made up, and I mean, all words are made up, but that are fewer people know when you're reading it, and it builds the world in a certain way. And I think jargon does the same thing, but it probably does hit different I'm someone who knows what the words actually mean.
Yeah, no problem.
Hawk's fur plays a key role in building his character, really. Why hair? And you use it as a way to provide contrast between things AI is really good at and things it just cannot do. Talk about
Yeah.
those choices.
Yeah, I think in writing the book and thinking about like AI versus humanity, one of the things that I was trying to get at or make sure that I incorporated was that, one of our special abilities as humans is intuition, and that can influence a lot of things like creativity, love, and it's definitely not something that's perfect. We have intuitions about things that are wrong all the time, especially like in relationships. But it's very human. I thought thinking that there are going to be aspects of being a person, being a human that AI is ultimately not going to get. And one of the things in my book, like as a writer, I'm able to choose it. One of the things that made sense to me and to explore was hair because of, the cultural implications of hair and the self-expression of hair. And thinking that it could be something that AI like can understand or grok to a certain level in terms of like if you ask it what is the significance of hair? It can like spit out an answer, but to actually be able to identify like the nuances of it, to actually be able to like, tell you how you're supposed to like care for it or tell you like what these different aspects of hairstyles or care might mean to a person. I think it just wouldn't get it right. So it was that way of showing something that's very intuitively human, like, people that grow up with doing each other's hair in the family, it becomes like a social thing. And it's just they wouldn't be able to explain to you how they might braid or the comfort that they get from when their, mom or loved one does their hair. They wouldn't be able to explain it, but it's there and it's undeniable. So to have something that is that simple in a way be something that's so hard for AI, that's that's one of the things I was trying to get at. I forget exactly what the saying is, but something about like AI can do the hard things easy, but can't do the easy things, if that makes sense. I'm botching
No, no,
the
absolutely.
the
No,
quote.
that's exactly one of the really fascinating things about it because we are used to thinking of lawyers and engineers as being those very important, human jobs, but they're the ones that are easiest to replace with AI, whereas hairstylists would be way low on that list. So, yeah. Okay, this question may be too out of left field, but I'm going to try it anyway. So we will just see. You talk about the concept of essence in the work, and
Hmm.
you ascribe to Dr. Cameron Dryden, which I assume is a hat tip to the author. But it reminds me of some of the work that comes out of the Institute for Noetic Sciences and folks like
Hmm.
Dr. Dean Radin and Lynn McTaggart. I wonder if that is intentional on your part, if you have been reading the same weird science stuff that I have, or if it's completely separate.
So not the same exact weird science stuff, but when I was thinking about the essence and thinking about uh kind of my door in or my justification that okay this could be plausible, think about something like dark matter and just even quantum mechanics and just the more you learn about even math, just the more you learn about science and physics, at first it makes a lot of sense and then it's like, oh, our world is weird. And so thinking of dark matter where it's like okay, it's an agreement that it exists, that it has a big effect on our universe, but it's like show it to me. Oh, I can't. Quantify it. I can't. What is it? We don't really know. So thinking that those are aspects that can exist, that's where I kind of pulled from when thinking about the essence. Like, it's just some what's it called? Some just innate part of the universe that has a big tangible effect. And just because we can't, point to it, just because it might not make logical sense, doesn't mean that it's not real. So really thinking of that, and then it just slipped my brain. But there's some other kind of like weird thing about science that if it comes back to me, I'll say it. But just also gives me like science is weird. The things that we're learning about the universe is weird. I'm gonna put some weird stuff in here. And the placebo effect is real as well. And I also know that just there's a lot of just that intuitive like human to human connection that you just can't replicate. I feel like in a pill or in a lab or with like a an AI avatar.
So, what are you working on now?
So definitely continuing to write. I finished a draft, a first draft of a novel recently. It's a horror novel, and it's a science fiction thriller crossover, and it actually deals with quantum mechanics, and it deals with multiple universes, but not in kind of a. I know that's like a big thing now. I feel like I keep choosing these things that become big things, but approaching it from just an intellectual fascination of thinking about, like, for example, Schrodinger's cat and what that might look like if, the thing that split the universe is a choice, just frankly, if someone's going to murder their best friend or not. And it also explores psychopathy and body horror. So I've been really excited about working on it. It's been able to kind of, reinvigorate like my writing muscle as I kind of get through, the grueling process of publishing a novel. So I've been doing that. I just finished a short story that I sent off to this anthology. It's a horror short story. Just finished it literally last night. It's about generational trauma and it's about curses. And I did write an original short story set in the world of this novel like last month. So definitely still writing. I feel like my writing muscle is primed. I would love to write more in this world, and we'll see how this year turns out. But definitely have more novels in me, definitely have more stories in me.
So, what is the best place for people to follow your work online?
Yes. So my website is justinckey.com. And most of my social is Justin C. Key on Instagram, trying a little bit at TikTok. There is still a profile up at X, but it feels, it definitely feels like screaming into the void. But if you're so inclined, I think it's Justin Key underscore MD there. Yeah, but mainly if you look up Justin C. Key, I should pop up.
Thanks for listening to the Starbase Indy Podcast. For more information on what we're up to this year, check out our website at starbaseindy.org or any of our social medias. See you on the Starbase.
For
Well, it has been fantastic to talk to you. Thank you so much for taking the time.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you for being so thoughtful about my novel. This is really like one of the really great parts, like seeing out there, having people read it and my brain stuff interact with their brain stuff and see what comes out of it. So amazing conversation. Thanks for spending such time on the questions and just, giving me a good time.